Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well wherever you are. Thank you for those who have subscribed to my channel. If you have not, please do so. Welcome to our fourth lesson of the topic leisure activities and tourism. And this time we're going to look at the management and sustainability of tourism. But first we need to understand what sustainable tourism is. This is where tourism benefits both the current and future generations without damaging social, environmental, and economic structures of the receiving area. So basically, sustainable tourism is all about enjoying the tourist attractions that are available today, and also keeping in mind that the people in the future will have to enjoy the same things. So let's look at some of the strategies that have been put in place by different countries in order to sustain the tourist attractions that are available. So strategy number one, we're going to look at the establishment of guidelines to tourists. What this means is that we have, for example, an information center or signposts where tourists get different information on how they must behave while they are at a certain tourist area. Another thing is fencing of some vulnerable areas. There are some places where if you leave them exposed to tourists, they might be damaged. For example, sand dunes, if you remember, we covered that in the topic of costs. So fencing is very important to keep tourists out of such places. Sensitization of tourists to fly less and stay longer. For example, in the case of East African countries where we have Kenya, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, and Tanzania, we could encourage tourists to fly once and maybe be able to visit the different attractions in the 5 countries rather than coming to Rwanda at first and then they fly back and come back to maybe Uganda. That would mean they are going to be causing more damage, of course, with flights and air pollution. Another thing is encouraging tourists to use locally run facilities. Here we are talking about things like local hotels, lodges. Instead of using those big international hotel chains, they should use the local facilities so that the money that they bring can stay within the country. Remember, we talked about the problem of profit repatriation, whereby the foreign-owned companies would remain with all the money and take the profits back in their home countries, which is not good. So another strategy, we would look at establishment of quotas. Quotas here is specifying a certain number of tourists that can access a tourist facility at a given point in time. For example, we could say that per day we were going to allow only 100,000 people into the national park, or depending on the size of the park, such that we can only have a number that can be accommodated. We also have establishment of restrictions on tourist activities. We would put, for example, restrictions like no smoking, no cutting trees, do not touch this, don't pick that, so that tourists can be able to maintain a distance and keep the facilities safe, especially vegetation and animals. Then we can also another strategy of protection of wild animals within national parks. Here, of course, in a national park, it is property of the government, and animals are protected against poaching. People are not allowed to live within the national park area, so that animals are able to live well without any problems and they can stay for longer. Creation of tourist hubs is another strategy. If you remember, we talked about in the topic of industrialization, we mentioned industrial parks or industrial zones where industries are all located in one place. So in this case, we're talking about tourist hubs. Instead of having tourist attractions scattered all around the country, we would have most of the attractions in one particular place, so that when tourists come, they enjoy everything in one place instead of going to very many places, causing damage everywhere they go. So basically, these are some of the strategies that we could use to maintain our attractions for future generations to benefit. So we're going to take a look at a case study where sustainable tourism is being encouraged, and this is going to be in the Amazon, where the Chichua people are doing a lot to protect their area from being damaged by tourists. So let's first understand Who are the Chichua people? So these are people that are an indigenous tribe living in the Amazon forest, especially in countries like Ecuador and Peru. And then they also have a very small population, only about 2.5 million people in the whole world. And the other thing is they mainly engage in crop farming, but also do some bit of hunting for meat. Of course, they do this in the Amazon forest. The other thing about the Chichua people is that they benefit a lot from tourism because the Amazon is one of the major tourist destinations. They have a set of rules which they have established for tourists to follow so that they can maintain the facilities that they have. So let's take a look at some of the guidelines that the Chichua people have put in place to ensure that the Amazon forest where they live is safe. So number one, if you need to go to the toilet and facilities are not immediately available, go to the side of the forest track. This is a road, never in or near a stream or a lake. So you can imagine they are preventing people against polluting rivers and lakes. Another one, all rubbish, e.g. empty bottles and tubes, must be taken away by visitors. This one is preventing littering. Do not enter people's houses without being invited in. Do not make promises you may not be able to keep, e.g. send back photos after the visit. So basically they want to protect the image of the people, and also preventing tourists to enter houses would also guard against some diseases. And always check first before touching plants or animals. This is very important because touching animals could cause diseases, and also on the part of tourists, they need to be protected. They say they may cause a rash or sting you. Do not collect plants, insects, or animals unless you have permission. This again is aimed at protecting the plants from being damaged by tourists or animals from being touched. Visitors should never go off alone. It's easy to get lost in the rainforest. This is for the benefit of the tourists. When walking in the rainforest, do not touch any branches without looking carefully. First, they may carry thorns, dangerous insects, or even snakes. Once again, this is protecting the tourists. Do not pull on branches or vines. They may fall down on you. Avoid any displays of affection, even with close friends. In this community, it is considered rude to hold hands or kiss in public. This definitely, you can see, it is protecting the traditional cultures of the Chichua people. Exchanges of clothing or other personal items with community members are not allowed, nor are community members allowed to accept gifts. This could also be aimed at protecting people from catching some diseases that could be carried by the tourists. So these are the guidelines the Chichua people have put in place to ensure sustainable tourism. We are going to look at another case study. This is the Peak District National Park. It is found in the UK. It is an upland area located in central England. Very important facts that you need to be able to remember in answering a case study question. UK's first national park, it was established in 1951 as the first national park in UK. It covers a land area of 1,440 kilometers squared. Very important statistics that you need to recall. It is the world's second most visited national park. This is very good. The first most visited national park in the world is the Fuji Mountain National Park in Japan. So the Peak District National Park comes in second place. Remember that. Surrounded by urban areas. We have urban areas like Sheffield, Derbyshire, Stoke, and Manchester, and others that are around this Peak District National Park. So you can imagine it is very important to have urban centers and populations around. So this is a map that shows the location of the Peak District. So you can see the black thick boundary that surrounds the extent of the Peak District National Park. and you can see places like Manchester right there. There is Huddersfield up there, Sheffield, you can see it on the right. Chesterfield is another town. Stoke is down there, and Derbyshire right here. So this is the place that we call Peak District, and it has a national park. So let's take a look at some of the attractions that we have in the Peak District National Park. Of course, we categorize these attractions into human attractions and physical attractions. So we will take a look at some of the human attractions first. We have this beautiful area, this beautiful house. It is called Chatsworth House. It is found in Sheffield. You can see that it is some very beautiful palace, and you can see tourists around there. We have another place called Castleton. It's a village that is found in Derbyshire, and within Castleton we have a very old castle. You can see on the uphill there from the very many centuries ago. So this is a place that attracts people, and this is a clear view of the Peveril Castle, and you can see the tourists are around there. And then we have another place. It's a village also very beautiful called Bakewell Village, and this is famous for some delicacy called the Bakewell tart, which is a cake. You can see it right there. So every tourist that goes around this place ensures to have a taste. We also have another attraction here called Lady Bower Reservoir. We all know what a reservoir is, a man-made lake, and this one has been beautified with a very nice water feature. You can see a very beautiful waterfall. This has been made by man. We can go ahead to look at the physical attractions in this place. So we have natural moorland environment covering Kinder Scout, which is the highest peak of the Peak District National Park. We said this is an upland area, so Kinder Peak is the highest peak, and it has moorland environment. Moorland is some kind of vegetation that we find on high altitude, very beautiful to look at. And then we have limestone features in Davedale Valley, which also has a river called River Dove. You can see how tourists are around this place taking a look at the beautiful views around this place. Limestone features could include things like caves, which are attractive. And then we also have cave networks, e.g. the Blue John Cavern. Remember some of these examples because case study question takes 7 marks and you only get them when you have some of these examples. So Blue John Cavern, a cavern is same as cave, and we can see from the picture that this is a very beautiful long walk through underground rocks. So that is a cave, and you can see that some networks have been enlarged through mining. So this is the signpost that shows us the entrance to the Blue John Cavern, and people are able to walk through and enjoy the view. So we also have natural springs, for example the St. Anne's Well, which is found at Buxton, and it is believed to have healing waters. So you can see a tap of flowing water. People come with different containers, bottles, and they take water which they believe to be blessed with healing powers. We also have another feature, the Roches Limestone Cliff. You can see this whole cliff face. We call it the Roches Limestone Cliff, and this one is very famous for climbers. You can see this person trying to climb, very risky activity but very enjoyable. So basically those are some of the attractions. Remember to have them at your fingertips so that you can be able to use them in examples. So what are some of the benefits of tourism in this area? Number one, job creation. So we look at employment opportunities. We are looking at this number that over 14,200 jobs have been created. Very important. You need to remember to have statistics. Some of the job examples, we can have resort managers. We can have right here, we have a tourist guide or a tour guide. And other jobs could include drivers. You can have people who work as waiters and waitresses, among others. Remember, some jobs are direct while others are indirect. Very important. There is also increase in income or revenue, which is collected through taxes. And we can see that over 600 million US dollars are collected from tourism per year, which is very important for the economy. And next, we can also look at the development of infrastructures. So many roads, airports, ports, railways, energy, utilities. Here we can have water. We have schools, universities. You can see down there we have a medical facility. And on this side, we have a football pitch. Remember, we said Manchester is one of the urban areas around this place. So we can have the football pitch for Manchester as one of the facilities that have been put in place. And these are in turn used by people around to either have fun or to move around. Okay, we also have an improvement of facilities such as restaurants. Remember this Bakewell tart, which is a very important delicacy in one of the areas. So there is an improvement there. We also have another advantage, that protection of historical landmarks. For example, I showed you the Pelville Castle, which is a very old castle that attracts so many tourists. Another historical landmark is the Chatsworth House, which I showed you earlier. So these are preserved because they are important tourist attractions. We have another advantage, protection of natural beauty. You can see how beautiful this place looks like. A lot of green has been maintained, and beautiful villages right there, gardens that are well managed. So this is important because these things attract tourists, so they have been protected. Let's take a look at some of the problems that have risen from tourism in the Peak District. Number one is that the Peak District roads are quite small and have become heavily congested. So that is a place-specific reference, small roads, and because of the too many tourists and cars, they are very congested. That is traffic jam. Some tourists drop littering, which destroy natural beauty and can harm the animals. Very bad habits there. Littering things everywhere you go, it is bad for the environment and destroys natural beauty. Many tourists do not stay on the footpaths, causing erosion either side of the footpath, and this is damaging to crops. So this is bad. Footpaths are designated for tourists to pass, but some of them decide to pass through the vegetation and crop farms, which is not good. Some tourists leave farm gates open, allowing animals to escape. So in this area, we have a lot of animal rearing, like sheep, like goats. So sometimes tourists enter in those gated farms and leave the gates open, and this could cause the animals to run away. You can see in this picture we have the gate that is open, and animals are actually very well behaved, that they have not escaped yet, but they could go. Many jobs are only seasonal, leaving people unemployed in some seasons. We looked at this, so also the Peak District faces this challenge, that only jobs, the jobs are only open in few months of the year. Many tourists have purchased second homes in this area, which leaves many houses vacant for long periods, leading to rural depopulation and service decline. So because people from the urban areas of England or the UK have purchased houses in the rural area of Peak District, and of course they don't stay in them all year round, so these houses are vacant. And that means that the rural population is small because people are not actually staying there. And this could also lead to decline in services like postal services and other things. Tourists create air, sound, and water pollution, which disrupts the ecosystem. Of course, air pollution would cause global warming, and sound would cause discomfort to people and animals. Water pollution could also cause diseases to people and cause some aquatic animals to die. And of course, there the ecosystem is being disrupted. The large demand from tourists has caused local inflation. Of course, inflation, we define it as the persistent increase in the prices. So as there is high demand of goods and services from the tourists, the prices automatically would go high, and the local people would suffer because they also have to pay the same money. Solutions to solve these problems, we have our putting a charge on people entering the national park. This would of course reduce the number of people entering, and also the money collected could be used to ensure that this place is maintained and protected. Another with a quota on the number of people visiting the national parks, for example 10,000 people a day. So like I mentioned earlier, quotas are these are restrictions on the amount of people that should enter the park per given period of time, and this would only allow the number of people that can be comfortably accommodated in the park. This would reduce congestion there and damage on vegetation. Increased fines for people littering, and more bins should be provided for tourists to dump their rubbish. So you can see there is a signpost there that please don't throw garbage here. Fine is 5, either 50,000. Someone went ahead to rub it. But there is a fine that would be put on people who dump rubbish, and also improvement of footpaths and installation of footpath signs to guide tourists. You can see from this signpost, public footpath, it shows you where to go, and then it goes ahead down here to say do not trespass. So tourists are able to read these and will stay on the footpaths. A redistribution of tourists, for example, they can do advertisement of different sites within the park so that people are spread out more evenly. So instead of people converging or gathering in one specific attraction within the park, people need to be made aware of the different spots that they could go and visit, so that we don't have congestion in one particular area. So that would help to prevent any damage. Improved public transport, especially park and rides, so people leave their cars outside the national park. Park and ride, if you remember in the topic of settlement and urbanization, we said this is where people park their cars somewhere and ride on bikes. So we are looking at people leaving their cars away from the park and only come in with rides, or they can even be on foot, so that they do not cause congestion or even air pollution. It is very important to remember that some of these solutions are hard to implement because the Peak District National Park is a working park. This means people live and work within the park, so any restrictions on movement or charges will be difficult to enforce. Some people actually live within this Peak District, and you cannot say you will pay certain amounts to enter. So some of these things are difficult to implement, and as they may work in some places, they might not work in other places. So as we conclude, let's take a look at some of the questions from the past papers, and I've only picked part C questions so that you can see how they appear. For a named area where tourism is important, explain how the negative impacts of tourism are managed. Name of the area. So on this, you could use the Peak District National Park and give some of the solutions that have been put in place to manage the negative impacts, like we have mentioned in the discussion. And lastly, for a named tourist destination or region you have studied, again, you could use the Peak District National Park. Explain how tourism is managed so that it is sustainable. Very important. So Peak District National Park is the best case study that you can use. We have looked at it in detail, so you're going to try and answer this question, answer the last one down here, so that you can test how you can get your marks. Thank you so much for listening. May you please subscribe and hit like so that we can move on well together. Thank you very much.